local law firm has released its annual list of Michigan's most deadly intersections, and most of them are in Metro Detroit. Here's a look at a few. Topping that list is 11 Mile at I-696 and Van Dyke Avenue in Warren. Another is the Roundabout at 14 Mile and Orchard Lake in Farmington Hills. There's also 12 Mile and Telegraph in Southfield. Here to talk about it is Tom James from Michigan Auto Law. Tom, thanks for joining us tonight.
Perfect. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with how this list was made. What kind of data goes into these numbers?
Yeah. So for the last couple of years, we've been collecting information and gathering information from the Michigan State Police. And they release these reports that contain the information about like where certain collisions are occurring, how many are occurring, and then also the severity of those collisions. So we compile those into our list, and then we provide it to the public to help increase awareness.
And when you go through that list, did you notice any patterns as far as commonalities between some of these intersections or the kinds of crashes that are happening there?
Well, I mean, the things that we notice is that, and it makes sense. If you step back and think about like, why would certain collisions happen in certain intersections? And it's all related to volume. So the more cars that go through an intersection, obviously there's more chance, there's more risk of collisions occurring. And that seems to be the biggest and number one factor that we seem to look at and find amongst a commonality amongst all these intersections.
Yeah, any data that suggests what kind of crashes we're looking at? Are these fender benders, rear ends, or head-on crashes, or T-bones? Tom, we still have you?
Yep, you still have me, although it looks like I lost you. I'm sorry.
Well, I'll try that again. I was wondering if you guys had any information about the kinds of crashes that are occurring at these intersections, whether they're rear-end crashes or head-on or T-bone. Do you know?
It's a little bit of everything. So the data that comes from the Michigan State Police doesn't give us that information, but I know, right, this is all we do. Every day, day in and out, we represent people who've been seriously injured in car crashes, and we see a little bit of everything. We see a lot of rear enders. We see a lot of running red lights. Now, I'll tell you, those two kind of car crashes, right, running into people who are stopped at a red light or running through a red light, tend to be indicative of distracted driving. We see a lot of that still.
Sure. And then how about roundabouts? You know, there's that one that's kind of in your law firm's neck of the woods in Farmington Hills. I know that roundabout, and those are still a challenge for a lot of people, whether it's a few lanes or even just one. Some people just aren't sure what to do, and I imagine that confusion kind of adds to some problems.
Yeah, exactly. It does. I think it does add to some confusion. It takes a little while to get used to the flow of entering into a roundabout and then how to get out, all of that stuff. I mean, we've seen movies such as European Vacation where they joke about it, getting stuck in there. But I'll tell you, the reason why the roundabouts were created is to make things safer. It makes everybody slow down as they enter intersections. And then in theory, right, if you have a collision at a slower speed, there's probably going to be fewer injuries. Now, statistically, though, we did break down some of the information that came from the state of Michigan or from MSP. And even looking at the top, like, let's say the top four intersections of collisions, of the top four, two of those are roundabouts. But the interesting fact about that is the number one intersection, you have 218 collisions with 52 injuries that occurred. So that's 23% of the people that are, in these crashes are getting injured. But you look at number two on the list, which is 160 collisions occurring, only 11 resulted in reported injuries. So that one drops down to 7%. And that seems to be pretty indicative of the numbers that we see, a significant decrease in the number of injuries that are occurring in roundabouts.
Fascinating. All right. 1 point for the roundabouts for a lot of people. What tips do you have for people who are passing through these intersections? Many of them are very familiar to drivers in Southeast Michigan. If you have to take this way regularly, what kind of advice would you give?
Sure. I think it's just the standard stuff that we learn in school. You got to be very alert. Most of these intersections involve a lot of pedestrian traffic. So you not only need to be alert about what, the cars that are coming, making sure that you stop and slow down at the yellow light rather than gas it to try and make it through. So be alert, look out for people. The other thing is drive defensively. While it might not be just an intersection issue, literally every day, this driving defensively makes me a little crazy. because I'll see people try and get into the lane next to them. They'll use their blinker. They'll turn their blinker on, but the person, instead of giving them some space and allowing them in, will close the gap and shut it on them. So things like that. Be a courteous driver, be a defensive driver, and look out for people.
Sure, we've all seen that before. And then finally, I know you guys have launched a campaign, a billboard campaign, to put some signs up around some of these dangerous intersections. What can you tell me about that?
Oh, yeah, that was something that we just recently started because typically, right, if you drive around the state, you're not going to see billboards from Michigan auto law. However, these billboards say alert, right? Look out, heads up, you have one of these dangerous intersections, or you have one of these intersections where there's a lot of collisions. And so, again, it's an awareness campaign. We're trying to build awareness so that people will know what's coming up, so that they can, right, be more alert, so they can drive defensively.
All right, Tom James from Michigan Auto Law, thanks so much for joining us today.
All right, thank you for having me.